So great to have you here as we move into our final segment of the Jerry Robinson Show. We move to this final segment known as the Road to the One World Currency. Jay, why don't you lead us into that?
Well, we've got a great topic this week on the Road to One World Currency. This story comes from the dailymail.co.uk. It's a daily publication online in the UK, and it's called it says the collapse of the euro is inevitable. Bailing out the Greek economy futile, says French banking chief. Now, basically, the European single currency is facing an inevitable breakup, a leading French bank claims, basically saying that a bailout of the Greek economy would be like putting Band-Aids on a mortal wound. Jerry, do you think that the euro can be saved, and will they?
Well, there's been a whole lot of talk lately about the pressures that Greece and all of the sovereign debt that it has is placing on the Eurozone and the European Union. And let me say this from the outset. I do not believe that the European Union is going to be mortally wounded by the sovereign debt problems that are plaguing many nations in the Eurozone. Now, I would even go as far to say as, of course, Greece is going to be bailed out. But we have to understand that the European Central Bank is going to be very careful on how it does this. The European Union is going to be very careful in how they proceed. And the reason is because something in economics called moral hazard. It's even in the political world, moral hazard. The reason is because if the European Union, Jay, says we are going to go bail out Greece, of course, we're going to go do that. If they don't show some hand-wringing, and if they don't act like, oh, we need to protect the people's tax money, and we need to protect, the whole European Union from this Greece problem, well, or as Jay says, the grease fire.
Yeah.
So we're not going to protect.
Throwing water on that grease fire is not working.
We have to protect, the citizens. If they don't display that, then what that creates is something in economics and politics called moral hazard. Then Italy, who is also suffering from similar problems, will say, well, hey, they should bail us out too. And then Ireland says, hey, they should bail us out too. Portugal says the same thing. Spain, who's suffering from 20% unemployment, says, hey, they bailed out Greece. Why can't they bail out us? So it has to appear very deliberate. It has to appear very planned, and they have to basically show some hand-wringing. So that's why they're not moving very quickly towards a bailout. But of course they're going to bail out Greece. Of course they're going to do this. The government authorities have to appear as hesitant, but obviously they have little choice. But in the end, the EU will not collapse. The EU has been too long in the making, and Europe is not going to give it up over a few annoying bailouts. Now, the EU, by the way, is the prototype, because this is the Road to the One World Currency segment. The EU is the prototype for other very similarly proposed regional economic unions. Asia, for example, has talked about an Asian union where they would actually have a regional economic union and a single currency. Africa has talked about a regional economic union with a single African currency. The Middle Eastern Union, the same thing. And there's even been talk about the North American Union, which Jay will be talking about next week in the Road to the One World Currency segment. Now, once again, the crisis facing the EU really serves to highlight the immense difficulty of simultaneously managing and being responsible for the well-being of a block of individual sovereign nations. Consider how difficult it is for the Federal Reserve to manage all 50 states and basically make sure that there's price stability and that all the money supply growth is actually working properly in all of the states, because Michigan has more problems than, say, Texas does, and Florida has more problems than, say, Georgia does. And so many of these states are difficult enough to imagine. Imagine being the European Central Bank and having to manage a block of sovereign nations that each have their own rich heritages and cultures and former currencies and deeply rooted monetary and fiscal philosophies. It's very different. This is the challenge that faces a global economic union and a single global currency. The road to a one world currency will be very challenging, and it will not occur overnight, as many suggest. Many like to talk about how the fact that, there's going to be a currency overnight, or the Antichrist is going to bring this currency. The point is that it's going to take years to lay the groundwork. And I believe the EU and their currency, the euro, is part of that groundwork towards a single global economic union and a single global currency. And this is the reason why they will not allow it to fail. The men behind the curtain, so to speak, are those who are working behind the scenes to create this economic union for the entire world. have very vested interest in seeing the European experiment succeed, because if it fails, they have to go back to the drawing board. Now, there's one final comment I'll make. There is a silver lining in this, Jay, the fact that the euro currency is actually weak. Because think about this. When the euro currency is weak, what does it do to exports from that country?
It lowers the price of
It makes them cheaper.
Makes them cheap.
So the exporting nations in Europe you're not going to hear too much problems from them, because the strong euro currency for the last several years has been crushing those nations that are strong on exports. So there is some silver lining here. We'll continue to monitor the developments coming out of Europe, Jay.
All right. Well, that's wow. It looks like we're going to have some very interesting times here. I'm wondering, how much longer they can handle that grease fire.